Arun Sundararajan is a professor of information systems in Stern's Information, Operations, and Management Sciences Department, and he is the Robert L. and Dale Atkins Rosen Faculty Fellow. And his new book on crowd-based capitalism, which I know he's been working hard on over the past several months, will be published by MIT Press in spring 2016. So please join me in welcoming Arun to launch.
Thank you, Elizabeth. I really don't know how I'm going to live up to that introduction, but I'll do my best. Good morning, everybody. How are you guys feeling? So I'm delighted to welcome you here. I've been at Stern for many years. You are joining Stern at a time when New York City is the most exciting and fastest moving urban environment for digital entrepreneurship and for tech entrepreneurship. I hope you explore that dimension of New York City and of NYU Stern while you're here. Hopefully what I'll be talking to you about will sort of, pique your interest a little into sort of this slice of the economy. It's really hard to define the sharing economy, crowd-based capitalism, and so I just start with some examples. How many of you have taken an Uber? Okay. How many of you have stayed in an Airbnb? How many of you have hosted on Airbnb? Not bad. So we hear a lot about Uber, we hear a lot about Airbnb, we hear a lot about Lyft. But what I've been noticing over the last 3 years is that the scope of these peer-to-peer markets, where rather than getting something from an institution, from a government, from a traditional company, a lot of economic activity is shifting to getting the same goods and services from other individuals mediated by some kind of peer-to-peer community and typically a peer-to-peer market. So if you look at the range of examples, it's pretty stunning. I mean, you can become an investor in an early stage company. You can become an online philanthropist. You can become someone who lends money to a small business. You can become or get short-term accommodation in a wide range of ways, ranging from high-end places on one fine stay to someone's couch on couch surfing. There's a wide variety of peer-to-peer retail alternatives to going to a store, ranging from sort of sitting at home and ordering it on your phone through Instacart, to sort of buying it from someone who made it themselves on Etsy, to trading in your stuff for credits on ThreadUp, swapping it with other people on Yodel. There's an incredibly diverse array of new transportation options that are emerging globally that are not, again, provided by centralized institutions, but are individuals being connected to other individuals who have labor and resources. There's a range of peer-to-peer labor markets, both the general purpose ones like Handy and HomeJoy and TaskRabbit, where you can hire a wide variety of people, to the more specialized, personalized services. So for example, now if you want to ship something to another city, you don't actually have to pack it up and take it to your local UPS office. You can just sort of put it on the floor of your living room, open your app, and take a picture of it with the Ship app. In a few minutes, someone will come, pick it up for you, pack it up, and ship it to the place that you want to get it to, sort of at a cost that is not significantly higher than what you would pay at UPS. There's a service called Postmates that will get you anything that you want in an urban environment in under an hour. There's a service called Lux that will park your car for you, track you on GPS, and then sort of pick up your car for you. So this is valet parking on demand. Go and park it for you and then bring it back if you give them 10 minutes notice. And often you save money because it's being parked in a lower cost neighborhood than the neighborhood that you're visiting. Once you get home in your Lux parked car, someone from Washio would have done your laundry and brought it back to you. Someone from Munchery would have delivered a meal for $10 prepared by a gourmet chef. If you're not feeling well after the meal, Heel will send you a doctor. If you're still not feeling well after the meal, Zeal will send you a massage therapist. If you want to sort of kick it up a notch, Drizzly will send you alcohol. And then there's my favorite, which is Ease, which gives you medical marijuana on demand, which I've been told by my friends is not a new application, but I really don't know anything about that. But it caused the Wall Street Journal to publish this picture recently of sort of the on-demand economy and all of the services that are available to you. But what's sort of really attracting my attention and the attention of a lot of people is the massive capitalization that a lot of these startups are attracting. Of those 10 companies listed on the right, on your left, only one of them is publicly traded. The other 9 companies have raised these levels of capital pre-IPO. And if you notice, 4 of the top 5, Uber, Didi, Lyft, and Ola, Ola's based in India, Didi is based in China, are in the transportation sector. And these massive investments are being predicated on the belief that at this point in time, the typical car is used 5 to 6% of its life. When it is used, it's typically at 20 to 25% occupancy. So you've got a 1 to 2% efficiency in an industry that is a double-digit percentage of GDP. So there's a belief that creating efficiency through these peer-to-peer markets is going to create value, which is why we're seeing billions of dollars flowing into these sectors. Uber is now valued at sort of the level of a sort of mid-sized to large car company. On any given day, Airbnb is worth more than the largest hotel chains in the world in its market cap. So one of the interesting dimensions of this new sort of crowd-based capitalism, the sharing economy, is the blurring of lines between the personal and the professional. We're taking lots of activities that used to be in the personal realm, giving a loan to someone, letting someone stay in your apartment, lending them your spare bedroom, giving them a ride to the airport, sort of being part of a supper club. All of those were in the personal realm. Then you had professional taxi drivers, bed and breakfast owners, restaurateurs, bankers in the professional realm. These lines are blurring. And that has interesting implications for both regulation and for the workforce. But more importantly, what we're doing is we're taking economic activity out of institutions. Over the last 100 years, we have evolved into an organizational economy, one in which most economic activity is mediated by large companies. And we're starting to shift some of that activity into these decentralized peer-to-peer communities, which are largely market-based, which are largely based on a digital platform sitting between people who have stuff or have labor or have money and people who need it. My favorite example of this shift away from institutions and towards peer-to-peer markets is a company called BlaBlaCar. This is their traffic on one of their subsidiaries, carpooling, about 3 years ago. And what you're really seeing here is a set of people who are traveling from one city to another over the course of a week in other people's cars. And so this is idle capacity in cars that is being tapped into through a platform where you are creating the equivalent of what a national train network would have been needed for in the past. The BlaBlaCar network today, which is based in France and operates in 19 countries, carries more people every day than Amtrak. They have done so without any new steel and concrete investment. So a question that comes up when we're looking at these peer-to-peer markets is this really decentralization, or are we going to see the emergence of new centralized institutions that simply sort of control these markets? And this is a question I'll come back to in a few minutes. But first, I want to answer the question of what is it that's causing people to trust each other enough to participate in these markets? If you think about it, like letting someone sleep in your spare bedroom, getting into a stranger's car and saying, drive me to another city. These are high-stakes interactions, right? I mean, these are things that require a whole sort of a much higher level of trust than simply getting a package shipped to you on eBay or sort of having Amazon deliver something to your home. And if you listen to sort of the rhetoric in the press, it would seem like, these platforms are building trust based on these digital peer feedback systems, these online reputation systems that have been around for 20 years. And in some ways, this seems to be full circle in sort of the evolution of business, wherein, 1,000 years ago, a lot of the trust that we got came from community. And then we created economic institutions of different kinds, contracts like property rights, courts of law. And then we shifted a lot of our trust over the last 100 years to getting it from brand. If you think about the economic activities you engage in, and just stop for a moment and think about them, you'll find that a lot of the trust that you place in what you consume and the services that you get is trust in a brand, not just trust in the courts or trust in government. And maybe we're coming full circle now to sort of trusting the community again, except it's a community of your semi-anonymous peers. But see, that's only part of the picture. For all of the disputes between Uber and different sort of city regulatory agencies about whether their online feedback system is an effective substitute for sort of government certification, these are just pieces of what is a much broader trust infrastructure that isn't all digital. You've got digitized peer feedback, but most of you, when you join one of these services, will have to provide your Facebook or your LinkedIn information. So you're providing trust through your digitized social capital. Some of you may hold up your ID and have it verified. That is a digital conduit to a government-based form of trust. And you've got third parties, and you've got brand. Uber and Airbnb have invested very heavily in brand. They realize that the population in general is not ready for a world in which all of the trust comes from community. So these are there are very heavy brand investments that have been made here. And then there, of course, is the role of the government. And so all of these put together create a trust infrastructure that is facilitating peer-to-peer interaction at a scale that was not possible 10 years ago or 20 years ago. A lot of my research has tried to understand what the economic impact of this shift away from institutions and towards peer-to-peer activity will be. You're increasing the impact of capital, like money in people's bank accounts, the labor that you might have, sort of the spare capacity of your cars, your spare bedrooms. You're creating greater variety. Contrast sort of the variety on Airbnb with the variety of a typical hotel chain. And one of the things that economists agree about is that there aren't too many things that economists agree about, but one of them is that when there's greater variety, that typically leads to greater consumption, and greater consumption leads to economic growth. You're starting to see people not just sort of rent rather than buy, but buy up to rent out. Some of the findings from some of my models seem to suggest that there's this shift in behavior where you buy a better car because you can make some money renting it out on a peer-to-peer rental market like Getaround. We may be losing certain economies of scale because we've built these sort of institutions that are able to produce more efficiently. But and the most promising aspect of the sharing economy seems to be the fact that the value creation is going to be disproportionately captured by people below median income. And so the people who are actually buying up to rent out, who are renting rather than buying, who are benefiting from small business loans, who are sort of benefiting from greater access to labor markets will disproportionately be people below median income rather than above median income, which is a promise of inclusive growth. What we're also going to see is a shift in the composition of the workforce over the next 2 decades, wherein a greater fraction of the population will be making a living as either an empowered entrepreneur or a disenfranchised drone. I mean, there seem to be sort of these two competing narratives of what the on-demand economy will provide, and both of them are right, of course. It sort of depends to what degree. This doesn't necessarily mean that wage rates will go down. My own research suggests that sort of the creation of these kinds of labor marketplaces can actually raise wage rates, and there's some evidence to support that. What's going to be a big challenge, though, is making sure that the safety net that used to come from full-time employment, we have an alternative way of providing it that comes from some combination of the individual, the market, and the government rather than from the company that you work for. All right, there's a whole bunch of regulatory challenges that are created by these peer-to-peer markets. You probably read about them in the news every day. I'm not going to sort of go into the details of them except to say that I foresee a shift of responsibility in ensuring consumer safety, sort of providing regulatory intervention away from government entities and towards platforms, sort of like the way that iTunes and Kindle now sort of determine what you can do with your music and books and not copyright law. We've already de facto shifted a lot of this responsibility to platforms, and the sharing economy will exacerbate that shift, and it'll probably be a good thing in the long run. So I want to spend the last few minutes of my talk sort of taking a quick glance at sort of what's on the horizon in terms of the next generation of peer-to-peer markets. This generation of peer-to-peer markets, the Ubers and Airbnbs of the world, have been created primarily by an ongoing consumerization of digital, where we're building products, that digital products, 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, companies built products for business and government. In the last 15 years, tech companies build products for consumers. If you think about smartphones, tablets, social media, these were built for consumers and then adapted by business. So you've got population scale ownership of really powerful technology. We're going to see sort of smart devices that know where they are, that know how much they are being used, and that might even be able to sort of call on a transportation technology from Amazon or Google's drone network to be able to transport them from one place to another, which again sort of facilitates greater peer-to-peer interaction. But most importantly, we've seen the demonstration of pure peer-to-peer, decentralized payment systems through the emergence of Bitcoin. And this signifies sort of the next generation of peer-to-peer markets for the following reason. All of the examples I gave you thus far were examples where the crowd was the source, the source of information, the source of labor, the source of capital, the source of money. Bitcoin represents a shift where the crowd becomes the market. The entire clearing of transactions and managing of the markets is done in a decentralized, consensus-based way, where you don't need an Airbnb or an Uber, but this entire set of people who are participating in the market are also running the market. Okay, and this has been made possible because we're able to reliably sign things with digital signatures. There's the creation of this public ledger called the blockchain, which sits on every participant's computer. And you might think, well, if this ledger, which contains sort of signed transactions, is sitting on everybody's computer, what's to prevent people from sort of changing it? How do you sort of prevent sort of large-scale fudging of the numbers? And that's done by making sure that it's on everybody's computer and there's some sort of consensus mechanism that makes sure that it remains honest. But then what's to prevent someone from creating 1 million accounts and sort of taking over this consensus mechanism? Well, you make it difficult to validate by sort of causing people who certify a set of transactions to solve a really difficult computational problem. So you can't just create 1 million accounts. You also need a ton of computation power. But who's going to pay for this computation power? Well, that's the third building block of a Bitcoin-like system, where you need some sort of incentive system to keep people motivated in clearing these transactions. And in the Bitcoin system, it's Bitcoin itself. And that's what's happening when you hear about Bitcoin mining. So these three pieces, sort of, if you couple them with a fourth piece, which is the ability to create an index and distribute that across a bunch of computers, creates the infrastructure for a wide variety of peer-to-peer activities that go well beyond payment. Because if you think about it, payment is simple. There's no product to be moved. You don't have to worry that you're not getting what you paid for. Logistics is sort of trivial. You don't want to sort of return the money after you get it. If you think about it, payment is a simple application. And we've demonstrated that this decentralized infrastructure can support payment. But now we're starting to see new applications emerge. Provenance is a company that facilitates point-by-point verification of what goes into a product. It establishes in a transparent, reliable way the provenance of a product. Okay, so this could be a piece of art. It could be the organic food that you buy in the market, where you're sort of you're wondering is this really organic or not? Well, a system like Provenance can actually track every action. Why couldn't this exist before? Well, the transaction costs were too high, and blockchain technology reduces those transaction costs. In May, NASDAQ announced that its private market, which sort of facilitates the management and sort of exchange of shares pre-IPO, would be based on a marketplace that was based on blockchain technology. So this is the first of a new generation of what are being called sort of stock chain applications, where we're used to sort of waiting for 3 days for stock transactions to clear. There's no reason for that. And so you'll see a tremendous amount of innovation in sort of the back end of financial services, building new marketplaces and applications on these blockchain technologies. But what's also really promising is the emergence of truly decentralized peer-to-peer markets that go beyond the information and the financial. All of these are really early stage, and they're sort of part of what some people refer to as the dark net. And so these are only sort of signs of what's to come. It's like, the internet and TCP/IP back in 1995, when you could start to see some of the promise, and some of the applications were sort of really early stage, but we were a few years away from really seeing how things were going to evolve. So OpenBazaar is like eBay, except that there's no central intermediary. You list your products on your computer. Transactions are cleared by a decentralized consensus system. Payment is through Bitcoin, and reputation is provided through some anonymous third party saying this person is good enough. Lazuz is a competitor to Uber that is a completely decentralized peer-to-peer ride-sharing service that does not require a centralized intermediary that is taking a 30% commission. Swarm is a distributed crowdfunding platform, again, that does not have a centralized intermediary. Two companies or two consortia, Ethereum and Backfeed, are building some of the technologies that will power this new generation of decentralized peer-to-peer markets. And it's made me think because I noticed OpenBazaar because Union Square Ventures, which is sort of like one of the most successful New York City-based venture capitalists, in June made an investment, an early-stage investment in a company called OB1, which is basically, sort of like a derivative of OpenBazaar. Andreessen Horowitz, another sort of really popular venture capital firm, has made a number of blockchain-based investments, and it makes you wonder, where is the value capture going to come from? If everything is purely decentralized and without intermediaries, where are the layers that sort of re-aggregate and capture value going to come from? Then I started to think about the early internet and the World Wide Web, which was a platform that allowed people to create content in a decentralized way. Okay, and then along came Google that facilitated this layer of focusing our attention, search, and discovery. So this is one layer of re-aggregation and value capture, where you're going to sort of get back some of the value that is distributed because it's hard to find what you're looking for, and you want someone to give you a reliable signal that something is really the best thing, best suited for your search query. And that's where Google generates its sort of billions of dollars of value every month. And around the same time, Amazon created value in a place where anybody could sell anything by creating they stole a bunch of executives from Walmart and created sort of a next generation logistics infrastructure, and they created enough trust. And so search and discovery, logistics, trust, and reputation, these are the layers that typically cause someone to be able to capture value that is created in a decentralized peer-to-peer system. We've seen Facebook capture value from search and discovery sort of over the last 10 years. A lot of these new peer-to-peer markets, ranging from Alibaba to Uber to Airbnb to Instacart, are each capturing value from peer-to-peer exchange by creating capabilities in search and discovery and attention, sort of focusing, capabilities in logistics, or capabilities in trust and reputation. And so although this decentralized blockchain-based peer-to-peer future does promise a world in which there will be a much greater scope of distributing value among participants, I still think that we're going to see over the next decade the creation of layers that re-aggregate some of this value through either logistics or through trust and reputation or through search and discovery. All right, so that's all I have for you. All right, and here's how you can find me. I'm easy to find online. If you have any questions, tweet me or email me.